Hey, I'm the Warmaster, Josh Barnett, and you are listening to the Bootleg Universe podcast.
So I want to ask you about this wrestler. Get your 2 cents on this wrestler. His name's Maxwell Jacob Friedman. Calls himself MJF.
Mm-hmm.
He's fighting Moxley for the title. So by the time this is out, we'll know. He'll either be the AEW champion or he won't be. But I personally think it's like pretty phenomenal. This guy's like 26 years old, and incredibly entertaining to watch.
I personally have not really seen him wrestle, so I don't know what he possesses in terms of the actual physical skills and characteristics of a wrestler, which to me is important. People they have tried, and in a lot of ways successfully separated the aspect of pro wrestling being combat sports. Yes, there is some hyperbolic. It's like watching a movie versus watching stage. Stage is always over the top in comparison to film.
Yeah.
But it's a different medium and you have to reach people in a different way. The movements have to be bigger because they're not as close. Whereas in film, you shoot real tight shots sometimes with very little movement.
Yeah.
Because generally when two people are having a conversation, they're not just gesticulating and gesturing so wildly and broadly. It is also an action for, it's like an affectation on purpose as well, for the sense of storytelling. However, pro wrestling is still combat sports. People still care if you win the belt or you lose the belt or you've defended it. They all care if you go and you defeat a certain particular opponent. They do. And I know people love to just like, it's the art. Or anything can be pro. No, it can't actually. There are some sentiments of just natural, universal dialogue and storytelling in professional wrestling, but that's everywhere. And so that's not pro wrestling that owns that. Like that is the nature of storytelling in the world itself.
Sure.
But getting back to the MGF, I have been quite impressed with with what I have seen of him as far as his persona work. And I like his promo stuff, not simply because it's clever or it makes you laugh or, that was a good dig. It's because he's embodying being a heel, or at least this is what I remembered, fully, which is something that has been completely abandoned almost entirely in professional wrestling because people want to always now be the cool bad guy.
For sure.
They want to sell their merch. They still want to be buddies with the fans.
Yeah.
They want to do all this stuff and be able to be the bad guy on the show and then show up on like Twitch or something else and be everybody's buddy. And it's like, well, okay, I know, kayfabe's dead, so who cares? It's like, well, it's certainly dead if you keep it dead. And the reality is, to me, and I believe that I would be proven right on this if we could follow through. And that is, it's like magic tricks. You always want to know how the magician does it, but if you were to really learn it, it ruins a trick forever. Generally, the trick is now unwatchable. So by even instituting any level of kayfabe whatsoever, any protection of the business that is possible, and it would take structural work, like promotions creating boundaries within contracts around that. But it would really, even more than that, it would have to be a willingness to take up that ethos again. Not for the understanding of trying to fool everyone necessarily, but really what it would be is to try and keep the stories and the environments that you're creating, the aesthetics that you're managing here, above board. And so people are engaging with that instead of breaking the fourth wall constantly, blurring the lines and ruining, in my opinion, the effect you're trying to create. Just like Dustin got chair shotted way back when, and I think he got a bunch of color out of it. It
was Cody.
Oh, Cody. Sorry.
Yeah,
sorry.
my bad. But I remember. I'm glad you brought that up. So I was going to bring it up.
And as soon as the Twitter, it really was Twitter fan base of wrestling, freaked out about, oh, you shouldn't do that. Oh, that's bad. Oh, this is dangerous.
And they're like, no, it was a gimmick chair. It was like he wasn't hurt that bad.
Right. And it wasn't just Tony Khan. It was other workers, like the Bucks and other people. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Like you guys, if you have to have an internal dialogue about that with, the parties involved and whoever is considered the office, fine, do that. Do it. You guys work out what you are comfortable with. Although, one has to say that, hey, Cody was in the ring and he's the one that called for it all. So if he's okay with it, then it should be up to him. But that's your own argument to have. But you don't take it and you bring it into the public. And in fact, the more that the public bought into that was dangerous, then it did exactly what it was supposed to do. It accomplished it. Like as soon as the Road Warriors took out Dusty Rhodes' eye with one of their spikes off of their shoulder pads, to the point that they're putting mosaic over his face on television as it's happening. And me as a little kid is losing his absolute mind because I love Dusty Rhodes and I love the Road Warriors. And they're taking a man's eye out on I was beside myself. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And the mosaic helped. All the work that they did to protect that whole event helped. But the very next day or the very next rag sheet that comes out doesn't go, hey, we didn't actually take a guy's eye out. Because what would have been the point? What would have been the point of bringing us to this whole brink to then go, just kidding, don't get worried about it. Like we didn't really do it.
No, it would be no different than if like a horror movie, like you get like a gasp from the crowd and then they pause the movie and then someone comes out and goes. So this actually didn't happen. It was actually a practical effect. We'll just show you behind the scenes of how the practical effect was done.
Faces of Death never says that they, in Faces of Death 1, that they, almost all of those are special effects. Because it would have zero impact on our childhood. Because we're close enough in age. We remember that was like, oh no, that thing exists. Yeah. Holy moly. How good.
For sure.
But I mean, if you did a little rational thinking about it, especially, things that we wouldn't possess at like 15 years old, you'd know, well, wait a second. If it was really that bad, well, then would the government even allow it to be on the video shelves? Of course they wouldn't, but all right, it's good to buy into the dream or the nightmare or whatever it may be. And MJF being trying to embody that legitimate heel persona, it gives you really it gives you the ability to invest in what's happening and actually choose a side. And that's important.
Totally. So I feel like actors do this also. Like I'm talking just movie actors, right? Like in 2012 or 2013, there's an actor by the name of, do you know John Hawkes? Do you know what that is?
Hawkes, I don't.
It's a character actor, great actor. He was nominated in the Oscar, in the whole Oscar circuit. So he was doing like the Hollywood Reporter roundtable, and it was like him, Matt Damon, George Clooney. He was with like celebrity movie stars, right? And one of the points he brought up was like, I'm an actor. I'm not trying to sell a product. I don't want to be selling the movie. I just want to act. And if I go on the talk show circuit and I have to be likable, then like the mystery is gone. The mystery is gone. Then, people aren't going to believe me as whatever character I'm playing because, they saw me on Conan or something else over the thing. So, and then after I heard that statement from him, I looked back, I thought back and I went, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Cause the talk show circuits back in the day were like where you went to plug your product, to plug your movie. and it was all about, it was a likability game, right?
I mean, it still is.
It
To
still
a
is.
great
Still
degree,
is.
yeah.
But I guess the platform is now less relevant.
True, right. Where the talk show fits in now. I mean, this is kind of part of the new talk show,
right?
So to speak.
Right. Exactly.
But yeah, it used to all be Donahue's and Mondale, or what was the other one? I forget his name.
Carson.
Well, there was
Leno.
Carson, Leno, the late night stuff, everything. Sure,
Oh,
I get it.
And it was like these little bits. It was almost like choreographed sketch comedy, where it's like, so, Josh, I hear you have a whiskey line. How did you do that? And then you're like, well, funny story, Addy. Yeah. But that kind of thing was at odds with being a great actor in the way that it was classically defined. And
yes,
it feels like
well, yeah, being an actor wasn't, oh, by the way, you're also going to be a PR machine.
Exactly.
Being an actor was the goal and the task in and of itself. And there probably would be best to have like some kind of a buffer zone. It's not like you got to keep, even from an acting perspective, you wouldn't have to keep people in the dark forever, and to forever silence any understanding of the production of a film. Keeping that space between the audience and the film itself is important, because you want to create the most of immersive experience you can. And you'll see like so it was Scorsese said Marvel films are like just going to an amusement park. They're not even movies. I get it, because not only do you get just like as much nonstop action and CGI packed into something as possible, but you also get every cast involved in the whole production of it telling you how much fun it is and how much of a good time they had working together, and how interesting this one part was. And remember when that little in-joke we had going on set, and you got all the protagonists and antagonists just hamming it up. It's like, well, and not to say that there isn't, I mean, look, amusement parks have been around forever.
Yeah, and when he said that, I was like, okay, but what's wrong with them? You know what I mean? Like, what's wrong with theme park? Like on some level, theme parks in this new iteration of the world, it kind of feels like a dope. It's kind of a dope thing. You know what I'm saying?
But I guess there's a difference. But it's the idea right? No, I understand that theme parks do have a place, absolutely. But if it's like, I think it's the concept that this is now what constitutes film as we know it on a broad sense. And you're like, well, that doesn't seem like a good idea at all. It's just endless sequels, endless. It's also, I think, somewhat related to the fact that we just have constant reboots and not original material. To which, I'm perfectly happy that you made Dredd, which wasn't a reboot of anything. It was just a look at Mega City 1, 2000 AD's Judge Dredd landscape and environment, but done with a legitimacy that the first opportunity around had the choice. The first version had an opportunity to partake in and kind of decided to throw a bunch of that away. I mean, I rewatched the original Judge Dredd a while back, and I'm like, you know what? The production, some of the set design was really
amazing,
incredible,
like ahead of its time.
And
like this feels like a lived-in universe, and now like it was awesome. It was awesome. Like visually, I remember because I was like probably like 6 years old, maybe seven and a half when it came out, the original Judge Dredd, and I remember seeing the trailer and being like, I want to see that. Whatever that is, that's awesome. Because it felt like it took like that Verhoeven aesthetic and like really blew it up.
Yeah, Verhoeven is really good about creating lived-in worlds.
Absolutely.
Starship Troopers feels like fully actuated, lived in, has a history.
Right.
And you're stepping into it.
Stepping into it. It's not a movie. It's like a story within a construct.
Yeah.
Constructed universe. RoboCop, same thing.
Yes.
Total Recall.
Flesh and blood. Very often overlooked, forgotten about Verhoeven first, I think, Hollywood film. And I loved the shit out of it. And I was just reading about how Verhoeven actually had a different way that he wanted to plot the movie and didn't want any romantic element in it. It was forced into it. But yet all the actors and actresses included just crushed it. Like, it was just such an interesting film to me. And it actually inspired Miura, who would go on to create Berserk, the manga. So, but in any case, as we get back to the whole concept of MGIF, and that is, we live we are, without a doubt, without any argument, we live in a postmodern world. And with that postmodernism comes this concept of constantly psychoanalyzing. Everything has another deeper hidden meaning potentially, and or just like constant and utter deconstruction and critique.
Totally. Yeah.
And we have this want to unravel everything. But the thing is, you might have that want, but that question being unanswered, it gives you more life force, gives you more interest towards a thing. It makes you seek these things out, which is a lot easier to accomplish now in the internet age. But I remember finding out about Japanese manga as a kid. Someone brought some over. They were Eclipse Studio Proteus titles. And it was like Dagger of Kamui and Xenon. And I just thought, whoa, what the hell is this? I've never seen a comic book that was this detailed. The people are actually dying in it. Like some of the subject, like, wow, okay, nuts. And none of it's in color. All right. So then I sought it out. But I also kind of knew what it was. I knew that there was something different about it because I grew up in the era of burgeoning cable where all these stations needed content. So one of the easiest things they could do was to buy stuff from other countries and dub it. Mm-hmm. So that's where you get all the kaiju films, the Godzilla stuff, of course, which had its following, but then you get the more obscure stuff in terms of American popular culture, like Johnny Sacco, mm-hmm. Giant Robot, which is just Giant Robo, or you would get Star Blazers, which is Yamato, mm-hmm. and then eventually we had Robotech, which was a huge thing.
Yes. For
a minute. But even Transformers kind of comes from that. So there's this infusion of this Japanese...
It's just like a wannabe Gundam.
Kind of, right? But there was like a whole toy line that was already constructed all throughout Japan, and then Hasbro bought them up and then reconfigured them all into one thing. And then eventually it went from these disparate... like one's related to Microman or Micronauts and other Microman in Japan, Micronauts over here, and some of these other like toy lines, and then they converged them all together and then created Transformers, and then Japan then followed suit and then got drug along with the American Transformers mythos and creation and all that. So it's so strange. It starts one way, gets turned into something else, and then it's like, oh, you're coming with. This is now reality for you, not Diaclone and whatever.
Power Rangers is kind of the exact same trajectory.
Yeah,
It's the same thing. It's like this cross-cultural borrowing, I guess, mm-hmm. where then it gets repackaged through like American marketing and then like marketed back to Japan. And they're like, okay.
I remember the first time I saw Power Rangers, I saw the ads and I go, oh, look, it's
Super Sentai.
Yeah. And then I see it and I'm like, wait, what's with all these? They inserted new American segments? I'm like, okay.
Yeah. So, and I grew up in Hong Kong. I was born in India, grew up in Hong Kong. So I was familiar with Power Rangers before Power Rangers existed. Like I was watching it was called Turbo Rangers. On TV, it was literally called Turbo Rangers.
Sure. There's a whole slew of them. Like I remember the first time I ever saw anything tokusatsu or Sentai was Dynaman on Night Flight, which was a parody, but was actually a show called Dynaman, and with these hilarious dubs over it. By the way, if anybody wants to see, you can watch it on Night Flight Plus. It's hilarious stuff. But that question mark, that drive to like, what is really going on, to figure out more.
Yes.
And being denied is actually a healthy part of it.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like the denial part of it is like it's like the scene in The Matrix where the white rabbit, they're like, follow the white rabbit, and then you see the tattoo, and then he's like, oh, I'm going to follow that, right? She's not like sitting there like lecturing Neo on like, this is actually a terrible example, but like, but it's like, it's kind of like wave and then walk away. And then they're like, wait, I want more. And then it allows you to go, it's an invitation to go down the rabbit hole to like learn more and and become like hyper nerds like us, right? Because we had to seek out all this obscure shit.
Yes.
And then like go and explain it to other people where they're like, you know, something, and then you're like, no, that's factually incorrect. Actually what happened. And then, you know,
it creates dialogue, and and that dialogue is driven from a place of love and interest in the aesthetic that they're creating. And so when you have MJF and he's embodying this heel, now you have part of the story that has an antagonist, and that antagonist is driving all the events around him.
Totally.
Because he's creating this issue. And when he goes on social media and he stays the antagonist, that's perfect. Yeah. And the thing was, back as it used to be, heels didn't sell merch. They didn't have merch really. You're definitely not going to see him in the indie sense. Wouldn't
the faces like kind of give the merch, the faces, the heels a cut of their merch, right?
They would. So if they're in a program with someone, they would always give them a cut of their merch.
Because it's like, you're making me look good. Like I'm getting over because I'm kicking your ass.
Yes,
and,
exactly.
They're paying to see me beat you.
And generally, that's just how it would be accepted. The heels wouldn't be anywhere near the faces, and they certainly wouldn't be having matches and then rolling up and having like cutesy photos on social media together. You're like, whoa, what are you doing?
This is us on the road eating pancakes.
Yeah. Hey, you're just like, wait, whoa, I'm supposed to be rooting against this guy or rooting for the other guy in some sense, and now that just doesn't exist.
Yeah, there's this wrestler on WWE, Braun Strowman.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is not me speaking negatively about anyone. I saw photos of this dude on social media just hanging out with his buddies, which is great. I'm like, I'm really glad that you have like friends and you hang out and you like take photos together and like make funny faces. I'm not scared of you anymore. You know what I'm saying?
You mean, yeah.
Like I used to have nightmares about The Undertaker and Kane.
Ah, sure.
Right? Like I genuinely was super curious about The Rock because I didn't know what this dude behaved like when he wasn't in a wrestling ring. You know what I mean? He would like wear these sunglasses and he would talk trash I'm like, is this guy just talking trash all the time? Which led me to like buy his autobiography, which I guess someone else wrote, but it was like half in Dwayne Johnson land and half in The Rock character. And I'm like, okay, I want to know more about this guy. Right? But yeah, like I feel like when the mystery's gone, the part of you that is out there trying to seek information, at least for me, just kind of melts away. And now you feel like you're being sold a product.
Yeah, I could see that. I also feel that it creates this scenario where you know it now. So you're like, oh, I already know what that is.
Totally.
Moving on.
And you can reduce it. You can reduce it, which I feel like the more you pull back from the public and you don't try to show them, then you can control the dial, right? Like I feel like when this MJF dude was coming up, I was like, wow, this guy's like really interesting. This guy's, because he's not breaking character. This is fucking great. Then, I guess he looks, there's a wrestler called EC3. Mm-hmm. And they kind of look a little similar, maybe a little bit. So there was like a lot of like EC3 comparisons. And then there's the Miz Mike. Mm-hmm. Then there were like the Miz comparisons, right? But it almost feels like there's like a perception, and you can play with it because you're controlling the dial. You're not like creating content all the time and trying to sell a product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course, it's pretty typical for people to relate whatever they see to something that they already know, right? Because they feel like they have some sort of anchoring in reality with some other product or some other thing, some other character. And
absolutely. But absolutely, and it's going to be compared like, hey, this filmmaker is the next Tarantino,
or he's similar to
or Wes Anderson, or whatever it is. But what I mean is, if you're putting out one film every 3 years, you get to really think and put a lot of effort into that one film, right? But if you're like a journeyman director or a filmmaker and you're like running around, you're like, shooting an episode of TV, you're doing, some shorts, you're shooting some commercials, and then you're kind of working on a film, you're developing 6 other films. It doesn't give you the time and the latitude to develop a signature aesthetic. And I feel like it's that signature aesthetic that moves you into the 0.01% of the industry.
Well, sure.
In entertainment, in the movie thing.
You can do, well, it's all entertainment. Yeah.
Yeah,
If you can do whatever the current paradigm is really well, dependably, that will get you a certain level of success, 100%. Yeah. But if you can be the one that kickstarts a new one, that draws a level of interest that you cannot purchase. Although sometimes, and which is so common, you'll get the, it was before its time.
Mm-hmm.
And some things take, usually the first person to see something and to create anything paradigm breaking or something that is like a really deep understanding of the current paradigm, and then exposing it in some way. They're already like either months or years ahead of everybody else. It's just the way it is. It's the way it's always been.
Yeah. You create the blueprint for someone else to perfect.
Right.
And
so, in time, you'll look back on it and go, oh, actually, this guy or whoever was just, man, did they create? But even then, there's always going to be this like pull, right? So they'll say, oh, Krull was a box office, burst, like a bust. It didn't really make the money that it needed, and it was trying to follow on this fantasy thing. But then if you go back and you watch Krull, you go, one, this movie is absolutely immersive and aesthetically insane and incredible. It's amazing that, and yet all the acting is really top notch, right? It has a huge cult following still, right? But it always did, right? It just, people were always going to be drawn to it. Just like Blade Runner, this wasn't, it didn't really work out in the box office. But yeah, it just brought people along in its wake. That never let it die, that never let it go away. Evil Dead and all of its sequels all are due to that, right? Okay, Evil Dead 1 did fairly well, I guess, for itself. Evil Dead 2, successful enough, but I mean, these are still smaller movies, but boom, it pulls somebody's career all throughout his entire history because he has a way of tapping into things and creating an aesthetic that people find incredibly pleasing and interesting. And it's just always going to be the way that there's going to be guys that come along and they produce things within the current paradigm that is good, and that, or even that is just safe, decent, and will be successful enough. But then there's those people like a Kubrick, like you say, who does something on such a scale in such a different way that everyone has to go, whoa. Same with Orson Welles, and it repeats itself.
For sure. But yeah, and I feel like what I'm hearing you say about MJF, which I didn't want to put words in your mouth, but I completely agree with it. I feel like this is a dude who is really taking a lot from how things were and using how things are now and kind of blending them together in a restrained way, where in a world where it's about eyeballs, content, he's creating scarcity.
Mm-hmm.
He's using scarcity to a great effect. I mean, obviously he's a very talented performer as well, so he's got that, right?
Yes.
But we've seen talented performers, both as actors, wrestlers, stage actors, not follow these principles and hit a plateau where you're like overexposed, or as you said, you get reduced to, oh, I know what that's about. Okay, I'm done. I'm not. The intrigue is gone.
Yeah, exactly. And on one end, you got to think that if an individual is a specific, unique thing, then by making yourself less of an individual, you reduce your uniqueness, your specificity, the thing that can draw people to you that nobody else could draw. And oftentimes that scared. Well, some people don't really know how to take an actual individual they don't really know how to present themselves in a very distinct and separate way from just sort of how they imagine themselves to be. You know, I think that's always going to be a problem for humans in general. Also, in our current paradigm, you know, basically
there's fear around it now.
Well, there's that, yeah, for sure, and that, and also that
it's like it's like join a gang, or you know, it's kind of a with us
or against us.
It's like the NWO actually did take over. You know what I mean? It is like
yeah, that is a valid.
It's like
critique,
wear our shirt, or else we'll beat you up and spray paint you in the town square.
Yeah, and you know, even approaching like me, and I've said before in social media that you know. All this pro wrestling is art. Like, fuck you. No, it's not just art. And have people just like, whoa, just absolutely incredulous to the whole concept of it. Like, oh, you're just such a dinosaur. And I'm like, well, you can say that, but what's old is new. And just because something is being done now doesn't make it good.
Wait. So you don't feel like pro wrestling is art or an art form?
No, I feel like there is an artistry that comes with it to a degree, but if you treat it just as art, then you lose the fundamental aspect of it, which it's combat. It is heroic storytelling. It is a heroic ideal. It is basically every
interesting
story that has ever been told since Gilgamesh. And pro wrestling is often like a massive mirror to its current society's paradigms,
right?
Too.
Which is art.
In a way, yeah. But I mean, the art will come, but you still have to be a fighter. You still have to be someone
okay. But sorry, I interrupted you, but like filmmaking, it's an art.
Yeah.
It's also a craft.
Yes.
Right. And if you don't edit your shots properly and you color it poorly, and the actors and the music's all off, then you're never going to get to the art. Right. So it's a craft first. And when you do the craft in certain ways, it becomes more of an art, right? And then there's also filmmaking done in a certain way that's more commerce than art.
And there's filmmaking that's straight up documentary.
Right.
Right. I would say it's similar to this. Like the actors need to know how to act.
Yes.
And the directors need to know how to direct.
Absolutely.
The gaffers need to know how to, you know, set up all the different like physical aspects around the set, and you know, all the best boys and electricians. They got to, like, the lighting guys. All these people have to have skills. The pro wrestler needs to know how to fight,
right?
Because they're going to go out there and get into combat with someone. Except you can't shake the camera a bunch and throw 70 different cuts over 30 seconds to make it look like that actor can actually fight. You got to actually watch that guy go out there and do something. And the more you try to set up just simple choreography, the more people watch it and go, oh, I can see the veil is gone. Like, I see that this guy is now selling into this and feeding into that. And look at how, you know, there used to be a way with professional wrestling where even after you get smartened up, you watch it and it just looks tight.
Yes.
And it looks like it's done
like
legitimately.
Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, Royal Rumble, you know, when there were the last two left, and then they, like that. That to me,
exactly. Or watching old school Benoit versus Eddie Guerrero.
For sure.
Or even though these were on the far hokier side of things, as far as even wrestling back in its day, it was taken way more to an entertainment spectacle. Hulk Hogan in some of his matches, man, when Hogan hits a guy with a fist in the head, looks like he's killing him.
Yeah.
It's great. And it's just the idea of, look, and even Hulk Hogan had to learn how to do catch wrestling and other stuff to be brought into the fold.
I totally get what you're saying now. I totally get what you're saying. May I say to you what I think you're saying? Tell me where I'm wrong.
What's your interpretation?
There is, because kayfabe's gone and the audience is now in on it in a way, or want to even present themselves as being in on it.
Correct.
Right? Modern wrestlers, a lot of them have adopted a wink and nod to the audience in their act, right? Just like if you look at like certain crime movies from back, like noir movies were a certain way. Now you can make after noir movies are a thing, you make a spoof of a noir movie.
Yes.
Where you're making a wink and a nod to all the tropes. And I feel like, so what it sounds like what you're saying is modern day wrestlers who are coming up are bringing in like a Deadpool-esque self-awareness wink and a nod.
That's definitely happening. It's a very postmodern way of viewing professional wrestling, and even a post-structuralist concept where you don't have to actually, it's like, we know if we really asked somebody, if we really distilled it down, even the most markiest of marks.
Yes.
And we sat them down and we go, what are you watching? And we kept going, no, but what are you watching? What is actually happening in the ring? Okay, well, what is the point of this? And then you will distill them down to, oh, this guy and that guy have an issue over this thing, and they have to fight to see who wins it for whatever, or for redemption or for revenge or whatever.
It's a Western.
Yeah. So, or, it could take on any, well, whether it be a Western or a sci-fi or whatever, they're still going to tell basically the same type of stories.
It's the Western story structure.
Sure. So
it's like the man's like the bully, and then the dude walks into town, and they're like, "Sir, please help me."
Yeah.
And he's like, "I can't. It's not my job." And then he like walks away, and then finally, like, the bad guy's being so bad, then his music hits, and the crowd goes like, "Ah, he's here."
Or he shoots the good guy's horse because it was at the wrong trough or something, and now he's like, "Well, now I'm in it." Most certainly, that is a very, 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 very common. I mean,
they're all
theme,
they're all Western story structures, kind of remixed into. Okay, now this is the one where the good guy, the anti-hero, has now turned to the dark side. He's drinking too much. Mm-hmm. He's hitting the bottle, and now, the good guy's become the bad guy.
Sure, you have redemptive arcs, you have all this stuff, right? It is just perennial storytelling.
Yes.
However, it's post-structural in that they're like, oh, we know that deep down this is a battle, this is a fight, right? So these combatants are going to go actually to war with their skills. But you know what? Forget all that. We're gonna change it into something far more amorphous and broad-based, and you don't even have to actually do that anymore because it's unnecessary, because we all know better now, and so who even needs to have any foundational repertoire and actual fighting, because we all know this isn't fighting, so why bother? And you're like,
so it sounds like you're critiquing two things, just so that I'm trying to
they're interconnected though.
Yeah. No, totally interconnected. I totally get it. But it sounds like, just so I want to make sure I'm on the same page as you, it sounds like the one thing you're critiquing is the story structure of modern day pro wrestling.
Yes.
Right? They've taken the Western fundamentals and kind of gotten a little zany with it.
Yes.
Right? It's like, oh, this guy's the best guy from there and the best guy from there, and they don't really have an issue or whatever.
Well, and they could meet in the ring, and then you watch how that unfolds, and then you roll out a story off of that.
Yes.
And it can simply also just be these two people want to meet because they want to see who's best. They get done with it. They shake hands at the end, and that's it. But they treated it as if it really mattered. Whereas a lot of the affectations of modernity is like, don't ever show that you really care about anything.
Got it. But what you're not saying is, what you're not critiquing is some of the more cartoony characters from back in the day, a la The Undertaker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I'm not really getting onto that. I mean, I think that's you could argue whether that's a step too far or what have you, but ultimately, they still showed up at the ring and went after each other like it mattered. And even something as reality defying as this guy's actually, I don't know, born from a grave or something.
Yeah.
And he has a magic urn and all these different supernatural aspects that didn't really exist in professional wrestling, really. I mean, sure, I'm sure someone will point out a case, but it wasn't, it was,
well, when did the Green Mist start? It wasn't, did Great Muta start it? Or
Great Kabuki.
Yeah. And when was that? It was 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that wasn't supernatural. That was just cheating.
Well, okay, but there's like the green mist that
Yes.
like blinds your eyes.
Yes,
Come on,
yes,
that's fucking crazy.
Well, it's pretty crazy. But I mean, you know, there was salt in the eyes. They used to do that one.
Yeah.
Throwing the fireball. That was pretty famous for folks.
Sure.
You know, foreign objects. So there's just like straight up cheating using some sort of another, you know, an illegal object. But it's like,
Or like even, sorry to interrupt, like, but Stan Hansen goes over to Japan.
Yes.
He's playing like this American cowboy.
Yes.
Right? And cheating.
yeah, he's a heel.
Yeah. So he's like cheating, but it's like kind of in this paradigm, it's not hokey. I don't want to say hokey because I think it's dope. I'm into these supernatural
Well,
gimmicks.
Stan Hansen used to just go ape shit and just annihilate everyone.
Yeah.
Now, Mr. Hansen, who I admire very much, and he is an incredibly awesome dude in real life. You know, he's on record saying like, well, I can't really see without my glasses. So I just, you know, I'm going after what's in front of me. Yeah, maybe. But I also think he comes from an old school way of doing things. And the thing is, any real deep professional wrestling fans like, hey, what do you think of Stan Hansen's lariat? Is that like, they're like, oh, yeah. But see, the thing is, even if I knew an answer that would somehow reduce the tenaciousness of his technique, I would never, ever let it out, because it's way better for people to go and stick with the fact of, yeah, that was like, it was like a bull charging right through you, you know, with a freight train on the end of his arm at that.
So how is this not an art form? Because everything you're saying to me, I'm like, this is art with a capital A.
I would say it's art like martial arts are art. So, you know, art as like a development of style and aesthetic and technique, right? So you don't get, you don't get the Flemish painters, you don't get the Renaissance painter. I mean, they're all technically trained.
Yes.
And then through that, then they allow those techniques to express their whatever their raison d'etre is onto that canvas.
Sure, but how is that different from screenwriters who are also
screenwriting
trained?
you have to train to know how to read and write to begin with, right?
Exactly.
And so the reading and writing in this case, in the pro wrestling sense, is actually knowing how to fight.
Exactly.
And keeping it. And it's not like you go out there and write a screenwrite like you're doing texting as a 12-year-old on a sidekick with just single letter responses and all this kind of stuff. That wouldn't make for any kind of movie.
Right.
The thing is, if you really know how to fight, it makes it that much easier then to portray the action in the ring as being as legitimate as possible, as keeping things within a certain realm of believability, but also knowing what it's like to even do these things and what effect they would have. So if I was to legitimately put you in a certain hold, how would you respond to that? How would you even get out of it? Instead of going from 0 reference points and just making it up and then expecting everyone to believe it.
So how is that not art? If you're coming up through the, because I feel like what you're talking about is the education process, right?
Yes.
It's the education process. It's no different than me saying, hey, I want to be a screenwriter. I want to be a novelist. I've never read a book and I don't know how to read English, or and I haven't really studied what's come before me, right? So it sounds like there's like from your perspective, wrestling education should involve combat training, real combat training, whether it's Greco-Roman wrestling, karate, kung fu,
all of it
mixed together, right? So like, it's maybe you go to like a centralized fight academy, and then some people become UFC fighters. The people who also have like charismatic personalities can become like,
well, it could be either or.
Wrestlers.
Like you need to be charismatic as a MMA fighter as well. Like if you need to stand out as an individual, because if what you're selling can be bought anywhere, then they'll buy it from someone else and for cheaper. And it goes the same for wrestling as well.
Sure.
Like pro wrestling and mixed martial arts are 2 sides of the same coin. There is no
really
taking them apart. No.